Okay. And let's just double check, make sure we should be live, and just double checking the actual Facebook feed. Let's see here. And there it is. Okay.
I want to know, can you tell me, are we going
Okay.
live?
There we go. We are live, baby. We're doing things.
All
Yay.
Whoops, I left that
right.
on.
I do not see it on YouTube.
We're doing things a
I
little
just
differently
got-
this
I
week
see it.
because we don't have Camille, so we will not be romancing Best Girl this time. We'll be playing Gris, which is an equally as
Yeah.
fun game. So, if you have not played Gris,
This
highly recommend it.
this is going to be hard because I'm going to just be all like, oh, let me just watch how beautiful this game is.
This game really is beautiful. Okay. Somebody will have to watch the chat for me. I'll kind of have it open in the side
Okay,
here, but
I'm having trouble finding. the
I've
chat.
got my eye on it.
okay. Let's do this. Oh boy, it's been a while since I've used an Xbox controller. Are you sure you want to erase? Yes. All right, Lars, kick us off.
I like using Xbox the Xbox controller. All right, so welcome everyone to Camille's Harem, not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure; it's more fun with friends. And it is sad that we do not have Camille with us tonight because Camille just brings everything together so wonderfully. And also, who's going to keep us in check?
Me.
It's like
That's
it's
my
like
goal.
boys' night.
Boys night. It's gonna be a hoot, hollering good time.
Boys' night is dangerous.
Yeah, if you see this is and I'm just gonna already throw this on out there. Like this is what I would actually like to see in like one of those reverse animes because it's like you always get that episode where you get to see all the girls like without the protagonist and they're always like bumbling and confused and everything like that. What would it be like to just like basically pull that with all the guys in a reverse anime, in a reverse harem anime? Like, imagine the
Why not?
possibilities.
Yeah. Wow. The beginning of this game hits a lot different after you've beaten it. I'm just spitballing here.
Yeah.
But
Just
yeah.
saying.
Wow, I think my blooms turned up a little too high. Anyway.
All right. So in any case, so for tonight to try to keep us on point and everything, some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about is we want to talk about POVs. How many points of view should you have in a book? And even sometimes like maybe like your first book, because there's definitely a lot of arguments for how many points of view should you have in a story. But like one of the things that you definitely hear from people like Brandon Sandwich over at Writing Excuses is that it's a cardinal sin to have more than one POV in your first book.
Good old brand new sandal brand.
But yeah, but then again,
But
come
then
on,
again,
come
it's
on,
Brandon Sanderson
come on, Brandon.
in his first book.
Yeah, Brandon
did you?
Cumberbund, you're exactly. So we're gonna have some discsions about that, and then
Elantris
also
had at least three.
yes,
At least three.
At least three.
at least three, and then Mistborn has two in the first.
And we're not even
in
going
the
to
first
count the
book.
ones in Way of Kings right here, right off the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And so yeah, we're gonna talk about that right there. We also want to talk about how to keep your characters in check when you are writing them, because we agree that it's a great thing to discover your characters in the process of writing them, but it can lead to some strangeness as things go on if you give the characters too much freedom on the page. So that's another thing we're going to talk about. And let's see here. There's a third thing. Oh yeah. Also, it's November. It's Nanowrimo. So we're also just going to quickly talk about that. Hopefully, give you guys, if you're doing that, some motivation to continue on, because we're nearly halfway through the month, and like this is the time where people start feeling the burnout with writing. So we're here to try to help you out.
I feel particularly guilty because I did okay my first week, but I'm also working the equivalent of like 3 or 4 jobs at the moment, and just got into a relationship with somebody, which is a huge time sink, for sure. And so
Yeah.
I mean, you've been awfully quiet for the past
in the best way.
I kind of figured that was it.
Yeah, in the best way.
Yeah.
And so it's like most days, if I even sit down to write, I'm writing like a handful of words, but I'm writing, and that's the whole point of NaNoWriMo. It's like, you don't have to, like, if you can't write, you can't write. Don't beat yourself up over it. The important thing is that you're making the effort to write.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was kind of my goal this year, was just to try to write every day. I haven't been able to do that. I made excuses. I'm like, oh, my internet's down for a little bit. I'm not able to get on Google Docs and get access to my stuff. And I'm like, what did people use? And like, I'm getting after myself now. What did people use before we had Google Docs and the internet? I'm like, I could have just wrote in a notebook.
Yeah.
I know. I feel guilty.
I would say, by the way, as a point, if you guys are looking for a good software to write on, highly recommend Microsoft OneNote. I have found that it is a great way
Microsoft OneNote's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's a great way to organize, but on top of that, it also works offline as well. And so it's been a great resource for me, because you can organize it into books and then into chapters, and then kind of organize your thoughts throughout it. And so whatever works for you. But if you're currently trying to find something that just doesn't seem to work for you, or if you're looking for something that does because nothing really is working for you, give that a shot, because it's free if you have a Windows computer, and it's it does most of the stuff you need to do for a pretty basic writing software. So anyway, little bit of advice.
Good advice.
Yeah.
All right, so then let's dive into our first topic, which is points of view, because this gives us a chance to have a little shot at Brandon.
Yes.
Now, I love Brandon Sanderson so much, but they're like, just as I've come to admit that I am not a faultless author, which like 25-year-old Lars was too much of a prick to understand. That is the same thing with Brandon Sanderson. I love the guy to death. He's one of my favorite authors, and I love having had the chance to meet him a couple of times. But even he can make some mistakes.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I think that his first book, Elantris, while maybe not his best book, is a ton of fun. Who cares if it's got 3 major POVs going on in it? Rathen is worth it, or however you want to pronounce his name.
Honestly, I didn't like him at the start of the book, but like by the end, he was my favorite character.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Elantris wasn't definitely not my favorite. But I think that it was a solid book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody's gonna have the first book that to be Brandon's first book that he like full on releases. It's a good. It says something. It's a good book.
Yeah, it's a good book for a first.
Sure. You've done good. I'm going to say this. I feel like the book, the book, Warbreaker. Like I like the 3. Like I want to say I like the idea of having 3 points of view, because it does a lot to like get in like, what are the gods doing? What is happening? What is happening within the court? What's happening outside of the court? Like you get those different perspectives, and that's all really good. And I like that it's all just set in one city as well. Like it's nice, it's tight, and you get everything. But at the same time, it's one of the stories where it's like, I almost wish that there was like another POV, or almost a different POV.
Yeah. I feel
there, because it felt cluttered and like way one-sided to the sisters, and the sisters don't even have any interaction with each other, and so it was aggravating.
Yeah, I feel like the whole point of POV is to give you a new perspective on things, and like I not in a traditional sense, like an actual like a mental perspective, you know. Like, yeah, you can have like, oh, here's the perspective in this part of the world, here's what's happening in this part of the world, but it's like, no, you also need to think about how does the personalities of these characters make the story different? Like, how does it change the perspective in that sense?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I
You were
also
going to say
feel
something,
like you
Scott,
need.
and we cut you
Oh,
off.
well, I forgot what I was gonna say, but I've got something different to say.
Sorry.
Um,
Sorry.
no, you're good. I feel like you have to like take a look at the story and like see what kind of viewpoints are necessary to really one show your world, show like the plot, but like the characters have to move the plot forward.
Yeah.
Like it can't just move by itself. The plot needs to, unless it's the Hunters Guild, because that's the thing. Um, but but it's the
Oh, Hunter's
characters that need
Guild.
to move the
I miss
plot,
you.
and it's the major characters you need to see it from. And if you've got a character that's like really affecting that kind of thing, you should consider them as like a possible viewpoint character. They don't have to be, but they can be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like that. I like this right there because like there are a ton of characters, and like this is something that you can like have some real that actually can sometimes help you figure out if you should focus more on a character, or not necessarily by giving them a POV, but just like realizing, oh, this character has potential. Like if you ask yourself, like, wow, like with this, like ask yourself, would this character be an interesting character to getting like his or her or their perspective, and
Mm-hmm.
then be like, wow, actually, this character could bring something more to the story. What am I actually doing with this character? It's one of the ways that you might be able to realize this side character needs a little extra development because they're actually really cool and they really help things out. They either help out the protagonist or they help out the antagonist or they help move the plot along.
Right.
And so it's like,
Yeah.
even if you don't give them a POV, you at least now know I should focus on them a little bit more.
Well, and
Yeah.
it doesn't hurt sometimes to consider giving a character like a very temporary POV for like just a little part of a chapter just to see something you wouldn't
Yeah.
outside of what the main characters would know. But you also have to remember that the main characters, the ones that the main plot's revolving around, won't know unless they're told or like the effects of what happened in that scene
Yeah.
comes up later.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity to do some like foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is actually something that like I rag on George R. R. Martin a lot for many things, but this is something that he does do really well. He does a really great job of giving like very brief character, like really small side characters, brief moments to like show their understanding of world events, and it helps to pad out your as the reader your understanding of what's actually happening.
Right. Oh, I'm just remembering a story I read. I think it was in middle school, where every chapter it was like what was going on around bunch of teenagers in high school, and every chapter was a different character, and it just
Mm-hmm.
drove me nuts. It
Yeah,
like I couldn't focus on anything that was going on.
yeah. At that point, it becomes, how do I say this? It's like you never get to learn the characters in that sense. You
Right.
know, it's like if you don't have
Yeah.
time to actually spend with these characters, then you're not gonna learn them. You're not really gonna fall in love with them. I think that it can work in like a short story setting, but like when you're writing a novel, like, I mean, you can make it work. Like, don't get me wrong, it's definitely possible to make it work, but it's a lot harder to make somebody fall in love with every character right off the bat, you know? Like,
Right.
some characters have the spunk, and it's great, you know?
Yeah.
But
That
you
and
can't have the characters
that reminds
have
me
the-
of.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, well, I was just gonna say you can't have every character have the same spunk,
Yeah.
and like, and I think that's what's important with your point of view characters is they're all gonna be different. They're all gonna experience the world differently, and so you're going to be able to flavor your world better, like having your characters be different and see through different lenses.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lars, what were you going to say?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say this reminds me like this is one of those things that marks me as a Latter-day Saint. But like the book series Ten Shoes Among the Nephites, and
Oh
it's
no.
weird.
Boy,
Yeah,
howdy.
it's an interesting series. The thing is this is that as a younger reader, I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of that series. But then as I started maturing, like as a fan, as a reader, I began to realize like there were some serious issues with the POVs that were being used because some perspectives that seemed really important were either being underutilized, or things would shake up like way too often. Like he was trying to cover like every single character in the cast, giving them some sort of like significant moment. And so, like for certain moments where you're like, actually, I'm really attached to this character. I'd like to know how he or she processed this crazy fight or this crazy reveal. You don't get any of that. Not even like in a later chapter where like they're still grappling with the effects of whatever happened. It's just kind of like it's past, it's gone. And so like it helped me to like realize like there is such thing as having too many point of view characters. There is such a thing as underutilizing or overutilizing certain point of view characters, and you also have to make sure that if you're going to use multiple POVs, that like even if you don't have the most engaging of characters, like you're always going to have that one character, as they said, the one who's got the spunk, the one who's just tons of fun to read. And not every character necessarily needs to bring that much energy to their chapters. But if they're not fun to read on any certain level, then why do you have them as a POV character?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and that's one thing I've heard about, like, one of the problems Marvel, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is facing right now. You've got a lot of characters that are very, like, snarky and spunk, like, have all that kind of stuff, but it just gets too chaotic when you've got them all in the same place.
Yes. Yeah, how do you balance them all out? And I mean, the first Avengers movie, for one thing, did a good job because there weren't as many of them,
Yeah.
Right.
and like
But it
they
just
all
kept
had their
growing
own
in there.
special moment to shine.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think they
I'll
all
just go
had
from there.
like unique personalities on top of that that really differentiated each other, and they actually like kind of worked like they weren't like fighting for the spotlight. They were sharing it together in a way. Whereas I feel like kind of as it's grown and gotten bigger, a lot of the like definitely like the personalities like are kind of clashing in some instances, and in some instances that's actually a good thing. It gives you some
Yeah.
real fun character moments, and character drama. But when there's that many characters, you just run the risk of personalities clashing, both in your own writing as well as in the actual story itself.
Yeah, and it can then just sometimes just become cumbersome because it's just so loud, and you have like everyone's going to have their favorite character to read when there's multiple points of view.
Yeah.
But you don't want it to be just like this insane clash of perspectives. And coming actually back to Brandon Sanderson, I think one of the things that he's done well with when it comes to the Stormlight Archive is that you have a character, for instance, like Kaladin. Like most people enjoy reading Kaladin's perspective because he's such an engaging, interesting character who's going through so much stuff, and you just want him to be happy. Dang it!
Yeah.
And then you then have in the same book you then have Adolin, and Adolin might seem like a bit much, and I think like Sanderson understands that, so he uses Adolin sparingly, but he also uses Adolin at all the right times. So like he does a fantastic job of balancing two very powerful perspectives. One who's like the very emotional journey, and then the other one who just brings all the fun.
Yeah.
So you also then that's the other thing, man. That might be one of the reasons why so many like well-established authors talk about maybe that you shouldn't have so many POVs in your first book is because if you are going to do that, it is a balancing act.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work, but as someone who broke that rule and put in a whole bunch of POVs into his first novel, uh, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, I think like you definitely kind of need to take a step back and ask yourself, like, okay, am I biting off more than I can chew here by putting in this many characters? Because I think like 1-2 characters like is a great place, and I also think that number one, like, yeah, this is your first novel, Knights of Halley Cruise, but it's not the first thing you've written. You've written quite a bit over the years, and so like you kind of have a good sense of like characters and switching viewpoints and whatnot. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, like, oh, you should have put less, characters in that book or whatever, because, that's the story you want to tell. That's how you wanted to tell it. And I think that at the end of the day, that's what's important, is that you're enjoying yourself while you're telling the stories you want to tell.
You make a good point there, because I remember seeing somewhere that, like, we were talking about Elantris being Brandon Sanderson's first book. I remember reading somewhere that it's like, it's actually his sixth major work, it's just the first one to get published.
Yeah. Yeah, he had written quite a few. And he had written...
Yeah, he had written quite a bit, which he...
I think he said that he had written 13 books before he had ever actually gotten published with that one, right?
Oh, really?
Even though...
Yeah, he had written...
It was his
13 books.
It was his 7th book he had written, but he didn't get published until after he wrote his 13th book.
Yeah. And there and like I would love to know like what he all classifies books, because I wonder like if the oh crud, what was it called? It's the Something of Partnell was one of those books that he considered, because it's his original backstory for Hoyd, and it's fantastic, but he never finished it. But like you can definitely see a lot of his original ideas for the Cosmere in that book, and it's pretty awesome. The Liar of Partnell, that's what it's called, The Liar of Partnell. But one of the things I was going to say is that when I was writing Knights of Halley Cruise, I knew that Ben and Jessica, who are the two main characters, would get the lion's share of the POV. But the first book is largely Ben's story.
Yeah.
Since he's the one who's going through most of the development, he's the one who's experiencing most of the world of Halley Cruise, so he gets the lion's share. And then the second book, which is yet to come out, is told more through Jessica's perspective, because now we get her side of the story, what she dealing with based off of what you see in her POV chapters. But then at the same time, to help give a little bit more of clarity to what's happening, because the title of the series is The Legend of the Ten Lords, and I was like, I can't call it something like that without giving a chance for the Ten Lords themselves to have their say in what's going on, and so you get the perspectives of Ashley, Stephen, and Sean in the first book. Not very much, but you get a little bit of it, and so that way you understand a little bit more that like, hey, these actually are their personalities, and then it kind of gives you some hints as to things that are coming, and then Gary, who's one of the villains, also has...
What is the Gary doing?
What is the Gary doing? Gary also has a little bit of a say in what's going on. And yes, like, I know that, especially as the guy who wrote him, it's extremely rough to read that kind of stuff. But it's like, otherwise you don't quite get what the slime ball is trying to do. Like, you unfortunately have to get into his head in order to understand how he plays into all of this. And so I use him sparingly, because Gary should only be taken in small doses. But then it's effective for how
and
vile
if you self-identify with Gary, then you need to see therapy.
Yes. If you think that Gary is a hero, I have some numbers I can refer you to.
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's kind of what I did with all those perspectives was that like you still like the main people are still Ben and Jessica, but the other perspectives, as small as they are, help to give better context to what's happening in the story and to help flesh out the world.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there's a difference between juggling too many POVs and having a handful of like one-off POVs, you know. Your characters walk into say a tavern and you get the POV of the tavern keeper as he kind of like identifies and like kind of like psychoanalyzes, your characters, like, and that's the only time you ever see anything from his POV. And I think that that's totally different from like having 12 main characters, like, yeah, 12 main characters is going to be a lot to hold on to, especially for a first book. As the story grows and develops, like, sure, adding more characters would be welcome.
And I think like having a POV like that at the very start of your story is a good way to introduce your characters, because you're able to like look at them from the outside, actually describe what they look like and how they like act like right off the bat, and then as you get more into it and get into their POV chapters, you're like, oh, so this is the kind of character they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to draw like another comparison right there, that kind of reminds me of the Wheel of Time. In that series, there's so many different perspectives, so many characters that you get to see from, and like it's good to have that right there, because you then get this idea of who Rand, Matt, Perrin are, as well as a bunch of the other characters, through the eyes of other people. And it's a great way of introducing the audience to the different cultures of the world without having to then sit there and be told how these people think, what their customs are, and so forth. Instead, you actually get to see that through these people's eyes, and they're just all like, it's so curious that these Westerners don't know to do this, or, those Southerners with their weird accents. And then the Southerners are just like, why do these people wear so many furs? And furs, that's stupid. Show off some skin. Or there's like, it's so scandalous that they show off that skin. It's funny, and it's a great way of through different points of view, not only developing characters but developing customs and regions.
Yeah. Shall we move on to the next topic?
Sure.
Yeah. So for the next for our next topic right here, keeping your characters in check, and this is not like as to like start a fight with this particular individual, but we have a regular commenter on our YouTube channel, Silent Dragon, who's got some really great insights into storytelling and everything. And we had a bit of a discussion a little while back about the autonomy for characters.
Yeah.
And like and their perspective is like, hey, if you take away a character's autonomy, then then what you're doing is like you're forcing the story to go somewhere. If the story couldn't go there naturally, then the reader will recognize it, and it's going to feel like a contrivance or a potential plot hole, and it won't feel as good. And like there's definitely some merit to that, where we want to avoid plot contrivances, and we want character actions to be well within their nature. That's important. But I personally feel that there's a difference between having characters act within their nature and then just completely giving them over to their own autonomy.
And
what do you guys think?
Yeah. And we're not saying you can't take away a character's autonomy, but you should be careful how you do it. In my opinion, you can, but there has to be something in the story that like makes it legitimate. Something in the story takes away the autonomy, not just because the author said so.
Yeah. Well,
It's kind of my point
so
there.
yeah. So kind of the way I kind of saw this. Oh, it like TikToks back and forth. Um, the way I kind of take this is it's like your characters. How do I want to word this? I think here's what I'm going to say. I think that yes, your characters are what drives the story, and if your characters like if you are fighting your characters to tell the story you want to tell, then it means your characters are the wrong characters for that story.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That is I
Yeah.
think where I stand with it. If your characters like want to have more autonomy outside of the story, like maybe you're not telling the story right, or you're not telling the story with the right characters.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good way of seeing it, because sometimes you can actually have some really interesting character ideas, but they might not fit within that particular story.
Yeah.
And like as an example, I'm going to tear into Brandon Mole, which pains my heart because I love Brandon Mole. But his
He's a
Five
good man.
Kingdoms series is a good man. I love him. Brandon Mole's Five Kingdoms series is a lot of fun to read, but one of the characters just does not work. It's the character Jace, and it's like this is the wrong book for him to be in. His type of character would have worked well in the Candy Shop Wars, which is a great series by Brandon Mole, but he does not work in the Five Kingdoms. He's just too abrasive, too self-absorbent, and there's no one to keep him in check either, which is not good at all. And so it does not mesh at all with the more high-minded characters. And yeah, sure, like a selfish character is not bad to have, but there are plenty of other selfish characters within the series who fulfill that role way better than he does.
Yeah. Interesting.
And
I
so
have never read it.
He just didn't need to be there.
Yeah.
The Five Kingdoms. The thing is this is that the first Five Kingdoms book is really good. The second two have a lot of great ideas that I think are poorly executed, but then the fourth book is just phenomenal. Like I feel like books 1 and 4 were the original ideas that he had for the series, and so that's where all of his love and attention went to. Because like one is, what if you had massive floating junkyards with like monsters made of the junk that attacked you? Like that was a really cool idea. It was a really cool setting. And then the other book was basically his take on the afterlife. Like, what if you had an afterlife for a multiverse? Because that's where he introduces his own take on the multiverse and he begins connecting his own books together, and which is like super cool to see. And he's all like, yeah, so how does an afterlife for a multiverse look? And it's incredible what he does with it. It's so vast. It makes sense. It's beautiful, and you get to just see like these phenomenal characters who have passed on from other books, and it's such great payoff. But like everything else is just kind of a mess.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I kind of I got lost in my love of Brandon Mole right there for a moment.
No worries. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it just goes back to the way I see it is it's like you should, if it feels like your characters are fighting you, if it feels like your characters are not doing what you want them to do in the story, then either evaluate and see, is like this going to help or hinder your story, letting them act out what their natural progression is, giving them that autonomy. Is it going to make your story better? If it's not, are you using the right characters?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's something else I want to add. Oh crud! Suddenly my thoughts fled me. Scott,
Yeah.
what were you gonna say?
I can't remember now.
I'm so sorry.
You're
I
good.
took that from you. But so there's actually so I want to share a story, and I'm positive I've shared it like at least twice on our podcast, but I'm going to share it again. Like a moment, like there are moments where you do want to pay very close attention to your character's own autonomy, and like it's annoying because I want to like give the full story for this character, but then that would be spoilers for the book, and I don't want to do that because it's a big thing. But there was one character who I originally intended for her to just be like a side villain.
Ah,
It, it, yeah, yeah, I think you remember this.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and so she was originally just meant to be a side villain, and then I had a moment while I was thinking of one of the scenes with her in it, and it was almost like having a conversation with her, where she was just all like, "Don't do this to me, like there's so much more that I want to say and do, right here," and and so like I kind of like so I listened to the character in my mind, and she's just like, I am actually in love with one of your other characters. Hers. Like that's not just me using him. That's genuine. And I thought about it, I was like, that makes the story way better. And she's like, yeah, so don't just like use me for one book
Mm-hmm.
right here. And so like I thought about it, and her character autonomy allowed me to add a whole lot more to the story as it's grown in my mind. But at the same time, the thing was is this is just all like, yeah, but still, these events have to happen. Why do they have to happen? Because there are way bigger players than you pulling the strings. Like you might be an important villain, but you're not the main villain.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things to consider when it comes to character autonomy. Is like, sure, you can give as much like power to your protagonist as you want, but there are going to be but one of the things that really should move a plot along is that other characters get to do the same.
Yeah.
And you as the author are the conductor bringing all of these characters in while they're supposed to complete the symphony that is the plot. And if one really excellent musician decides to play a solo when they're not supposed to play a solo, it throws off the entire symphony.
Unless it's
And if you let
perfect, but yeah, that doesn't count.
yeah, and if you let every musician do what he or she wants, then it's not a symphony, it's jazz, and not all jazz is good.
Fair.
I mean, jazz itself follows its own rules, even though
Mm-hmm.
the original idea is that there isn't any rules.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was one of my big thoughts. I kind of have another thought, but I want someone else to talk before I just steal this all.
I don't know. I think I had my one good sound bite.
Yeah.
So
Go
for
ahead,
you?
Lars.
Okay, well then, so one other thing I'd bring up with this, as far as like character autonomy, is that the conversation that was originally had between me and Silent Dragon was definitely one that catered more to the heroes, and like that makes good sense because the heroes are usually the focus of the story, and so you want them, of course, to be good and dynamic and actually like once again show off their autonomy, show off their individuality, and everything like that. But you then also have to think about, well, what about the villain? What's the villain's autonomy in all of this?
Whoa.
And what about other people as well? And it brings me, for instance, to think about something like Die Hard, where you have Bruce Willis versus Professor Snape, Hans Gruber. So you got you got Hans Gruber, and like Hans Gruber is doing his best to pull off the scheme and everything. But like there's a certain level of incompetence he has to deal with. But like at a certain point, you have to think like, well, what if Hans Gruber could just kind of like do what he wanted, like truly do what he wanted? Would Bruce Willis actually stand a chance right here? And like that's one of the things that makes the dynamic between villains and heroes interesting. One of the things is that usually the villain at the beginning has a massive advantage over the hero, and the hero has to figure out how to beat that advantage. And if the villain was allowed to just do whatever he or she wanted from the very get-go, there would be no chance at all for the hero to do anything. Hey, and that would kind of defeat the purpose right here, because we want to see heroes rise to these incredible odds and overcome them.
Yeah.
And if you just let the villain have their say immediately, then the heroes would never have a chance. And so, like within my own book series, The Legend of the Ten Lords, I try to address this once again by actually adding in the POVs of the villains and explaining from their own perspectives why they make the choices that they do. And in some cases, it's because they're actually playing a much longer, complicated game. Like there's a real reason to everything that they do, and it becomes kind of horrifying to realize just how far thinking they are. And then in other cases, it's totally emotional, and they actually realize that they made a really bad choice, but it was an emotional one, and it's one that makes sense within the parameters of their character. So they've used their autonomy, and their autonomy has been I've allowed that chance for their autonomy to kind of bite them in the butt. So like you can still give your characters full autonomy and yet still have the plot still move along, because the idea of the plot is my heroes are meant to grow and eventually overcome the villains. And if I just let them do whatever they wanted, either the villains will just slaughter the main characters super, super fast,
Yeah.
or the heroes would not actually go on the journey that they need to go on. Because who's actually going to choose to suffer to win? People would
Yeah.
rather look for the easy way out.
Yeah. And I think that's your story needs to force your character into getting out of their comfort zone. And so, yes, like your characters will, want to take the easy way out. Everybody wants to do that,
I mean, and it's kind of the simplest equation for having like a protagonist antagonist. You got a similar goal, both want, only one can have it, and so like there's going to be a conflict involved with it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So yeah, that's the thing right there. And once again, it's a bit of a balancing act to make sure that you let your characters have their autonomy, but also at the same time you have to be able to, like, no, this isn't going to work out too well. And there are times where you begin to think, wait a second, my character could do this. And when you have to think about it, you have to think about, okay, if they did indeed do this, which still falls in line with their motivations, their power sets, their personalities, what have you, the setting, they could go veer off on this different direction. What kind of a trajectory does that set me on? And if it takes you away from your intended goal, from the ending, then it's probably not worth it to go down that way. But sometimes you find yourself making choices. You're like, actually, like this would be really neat to see where this goes,
Yeah.
and then see how we get there. Because like one of the things originally, once again coming back to my own story, is that at one point Ben wants to recruit regular people into the military, and everyone tells him it's a bad idea and everything, but he goes through with it, and it's because of certain ideals that he has. That was not originally what I had in mind for the book. But I went that route because I was like, that's actually what Ben would do. But it does not take away from the fact that he's going up north to fight the Dark Lord in his kingdom. So he's still going the same route. He's still going to the same destination. He's just taking a different route getting there.
Yeah. Well, cool. Should we move on to our last topic?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Nanowrimo. All right. Oh, Nanowrimo. So let's see here.
So I guess we should explain to those who may have not heard of Nanowrimo. Nanowrimo is National Authors Right or National Novel Writers Month. Yeah.
Yep.
And so the idea is you try your best to write a novel within the span of 1 month. I am not
usually ends up being around like 50,000.
Yeah.
Words, something like that. So. Yeah.
I do not have the prowess to be able to write 50,000 words in 1 month. I am impressed with those who can. Lars, I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
And honestly, I just use it as an
Yes.
opportunity to write more, to basically sit myself down and be like, okay, look, you have not written as much as you want to. Now is your chance to change that. Now is your chance to, you have an excuse. You have something that kind of is motivating you to write. So do it. And if you need help motivating, come join our Discord, because we are currently doing like a Nanowrimo little hype
Support group?
fest. Yeah, support
Right.
group.
Accountability. Yeah. That's a better way of putting it. It's our support group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
no,
accountability
it's
is
been
half the
good.
fun.
Yeah.
Half the battle.
Yes. Half the battle. And I mean that is part of good goal setting. With good goal setting, you need to have people who keep you accountable. It like takes me back to like in Flagstaff, for like, hey, if you don't like if you met your goal for the week, here's an ice cream sandwich. If you didn't meet your goal for the week,
Here's also an ice cream sandwich.
we're gonna smash. Here's in your face.
Afraid I'm gonna get an ice cream sandwich smashed in my face for a yearly goal. But that's sad, because
we should totally do that.
I
totally,
did not mean
yeah.
that.
Nope.
I got a few chapters done with my nonfiction stuff, but
Oh, you got a few chapters done though.
yeah,
That's more than I knew.
Yeah, that's good.
but that's about it. I'm realizing what I need to do for it is I need to get what I want to do anyway is I want to send out a mass email to as many like professionals in like the outdoor recreation community, like asking them about how they deal with crowds and like overcrowding and all that kind of stuff, and just like see what kind of responses I can get, and then use that to like add to what I'm writing and then inform what I'm writing as well.
Yeah.
That's a really great idea right there. Because this veers off of this veers away from writing science fiction and fantasy. But if you want to write something nonfiction, or if you want to write historical fiction or something like that, definitely reach out to the people in the know. Whether that be like directly contacting them or like looking into what work they have done, and borrowing from that.
Well, and
don't just go it alone.
Yeah, I also think there was a conversation on our Discord earlier today, which I haven't responded to yet because I was at work. And anyway, that's all besides the point. I saw it pop up, and it was like, I have written myself into a corner because I've never been to like a camp before, and now my character's in a camp, and I don't know what they do, like what kind of activities they do. It's like, that's a perfect opportunity to ask the people around you. Do some research, like figure out, ask Reddit, ask, YouTube, just ask around, start asking questions.
Yeah.
That's what our Discord's there for. You can start,
Yeah. And
start
I will write this on our
research.
Discord, but I will say I'll write this on our Discord, but I will say this: when it comes to camping, you kind of have to ask yourself you have to ask yourself two questions. And it's one, like what is the purpose behind this camp out? Is this family or friends going camping? Is this like a scout camp out, a band camp out? And then the second one you have to ask yourself is, who is there with you?
Yeah.
Because if it's family, okay, which family members? If it's friends, which friends? And like this brings me to one of my most favorite camping adventures, even though it was also like the deadliest, or potentially the deadliest, because we could have died. Because we could have died, but we did a snow camp out up on Mount Lemmon outside of Tucson, and Tucson is
on the one tree. Sorry.
Tucson is a desert. There's you're used to it being hot, but Mount Lemmon gets cold, and during the winter it gets especially cold. Well, we got up there late, so the snow had already turned to ice, and then a storm came in that dumped freezing rain on us. And so you have a bunch of teenagers who are like, we're going to beat this because we're macho men. So you have teenagers trying to prove just how smart and cool and manly they are by staying overnight in in horrible conditions.
Yeah, that's
and
teenagers
it
for you.
and it led to me losing all of the feeling from my waist down, because where I decided I would sleep, I was like, I will not move from the spot. I ended up sleeping, and my tent got flooded and like almost froze over. So like when I
Oh
finally crawled
no.
out in the morning, I was just like, I could not walk properly.
Yeah.
But hey, I stayed there all night. There's so many insane stories from that one night. Like a guy setting his foot on fire to get warm.
Yeah,
Oh
I
no.
another fun camping in the snow story. I almost got frostbite. All of my toes had
Ooh.
turned completely purple, and they had to
Oh
rush
no.
me. They had to rush me out and put my feet in water. And I thought it was like boiling hot water. I'm like, this is so painful. And reached down, and it was ice cold water. And I was like, oh, this is
Oh
bad.
no.
This is real bad.
Yes. Yeah, frostbite is bad.
I made a little.
It's
Yeah, and
bad.
it can happen real quick.
Yeah.
Uh, and and then you've got hypothermia, which hypothermia you don't realize how bad it is until it's almost too
Oh
late,
yeah.
because you just get sleepy.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's good because I need some sleep. Because if I sleep, then all of this annoying pain will go away. It's like, don't fall asleep. We had two guys get we had two guys like borderline hypothermia, and they had to be dragged into a car and like stuffed into the car to try to like warm them up,
Right.
because they
Well,
had gotten so cold.
and like I've had full on training as part of like my outdoor rec stuff, like training to become a park ranger basically, like on like heat exhaustion, heat stroke, hypothermia, all that kind of stuff. And I think the wildest thing about it is that it messes with people's like mental abilities.
Uh huh.
Like it really messes with it and they're like, "Oh, I'm fine." It's like they're drunk. They just can't think straight. They can't make good decisions. Like it's just not working out properly, like in their heads. And so it usually just ends up getting worse once they're to that point.
Oh my gosh. Ah, you know, I'll say is having suffered in like intense heat and intense cold, I'd actually rather take the cold
Yeah.
than the intense heat.
Oh, absolutely.
both
Actually,
both are both are sucky, but at least with the cold, you can like wrap yourself up and pretend that you're doing something to help yourself out. When it's hot, there's no matter what you do, it's just miserable,
Yeah.
and it feels like it will never end.
I'm actually the opposite, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Then again,
I
I'm
guess
more
so.
used to the heat and like dealing, like knowing how to deal with it kind of idea. And I just don't like the cold.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Like, this is okay. You know what? This has nothing to do with stories.
Yeah, no, we're getting distracted, but the fun
Yeah.
stories have been good.
I know but
Well,
man,
and maybe this is a
talking about say that. What was it? Was it say who was it? Who was it that had that question? That was Shadow Bolt Hasio.
Yeah.
Shadow Bolt Hasio had that question right there. So Shadow Bolt Hasio, we can talk a long time about crazy camping stories, all kinds of
Yeah.
crazy camping stories, and
Yes.
you can write them down and immortalize them in your own story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's an excellent. Honestly, that's a great point right there. Is that this can be this could be an opportunity to have friends, family, anybody you know, contribute to your story. Like your story doesn't have to be 100% you. There's a lot of opportunities to, you know, to do together.
Right. I mean, and they say write what you know, but like often enough you can listen, you can learn, you can
Yeah.
like pick up stories other people have.
Yeah.
And
If you
like,
don't,
you know that now.
yeah, and if you write what you know, but if you don't know, then go learn it. And then you will know. And that's when you write.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
Well, I think
that just reminds me. That just reminds me of like immortalizing someone else's story. Coming back again to my own series. My two main characters, Jessica and Ben, are based off of people I knew back in high school.
yeah.
And I mean, it's not their story. They, at least as far as I know, they were never whisked away to a magical world.
If they were, I'm
But
jealous.
yeah, I'm jealous man. But I based them largely off of the experiences that I witnessed them go through, or that I even participated in, of them like coming to the realization I'm a nerd,
Yeah.
which is like, because like they're jock because these people were jocks, and that's the thing, is like I want to have jocks as my main characters, realizing and accepting how nerdy they are, because we're all nerds to some extent or another for different things, and there's just this weird stigma that even still to this day kind of hangs over the epithet of nerd. And so I
Yeah.
wanted to like take those experiences that other people had, because I've been a nerd for most of my life, so I'm
Yeah.
taking their awakening and immortalizing it.
Yeah. And well, I think it's interesting that, and maybe this is less so like actually true and more just like my experience now that I am more openly a nerd, because I was kind of the same way where I was like, oh, don't, people don't need to know how nerdy I really am, kind of a thing. That's how I was through most of high school. I mean, I think people knew I was a nerd, but just not how much of a nerd. Oh, fart.
Mm-hmm.
I missed. But I think that
Realize
nerds
how
are
much-
definitely a lot more, not appreciated. What's the word? Accepted in today's society than it was when I was a kid. At least that's how I feel. I mean, obviously, everybody, will get bullied from time to time. That's to be expected.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah. Anyway, I think that this has
But
been great. Is there?
oh,
Oh yeah, sorry. If you have more to say, go for it.
uh, I was going to say on the subject, because this all kind of began on the subject of oh crap. I was like, don't jump, Nate. This began partially on the subject of Nanowrimo, and it's like, hey guys, like here's some motivation. Um, like once again, like if you're looking for help, for accountability, for motivation, you can come and you can check us out over at our Discord. But also, like I'll just I'll give you the same motivation that I've given in some of my videos, which is just which just is like, hey, look, like this, your stories need you. Like I've talked
Yeah.
about, like how you need your stories and the world needs your stories, but also like your stories need you.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's incredible to like take some time and spend time with your stories. Like that doesn't mean you have to hit a certain word count. Like
No.
I'm always pushing myself to write as much as I can, but at the same time, so long as you're spending meaningful time with your stories, that's part of what NaNoWriMo is all about. Is just like, hey, like spend some time writing, feel
Yeah.
that fulfillment
Yeah.
of what it is to write. And if you can do that, then I think that no matter what your word count is, NaNoWriMo can be a very fulfilling experience.
Yeah. Well, and I just think about how a lot of my most difficult like moments, like the moments that I was the most depressed or anxious and the hardest times in my life were when I wasn't writing. And what helped me, kind of figure myself out was writing again, because writing is how I kind of process things in my brain. And so it helped me a ton kind of sort through my thoughts, my feelings, all through these characters. And it helped me, like, it's legitimately helped me mentally throughout my life. And so your stories need you. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And you need your stories.
Yeah.
And speaking of stories right here, I hope that Xenomits doesn't mind if we highlight this in the audio right here. But I love this story idea. Uh, right here. Um, is that so the basic gist of the story is that you have a kid who's being experimented on. He dies, but his will to live is so large that he bonds to a coffee machine, and the electricity in the coffee machine is what keeps him going.
That sounds like a blast.
And I'm like, that you could do so much with this. Like, does he start taking over people through the coffee that he produces, and like he then gets to live through other people? But like at the end of the day, he comes back to like the coffee machine, or is he like slowly like watching them plotting their demise like a machine that starts taking over other machines? Like, or is he just always going to be then the fly on the wall and just be the one who gets to hear all this hilarious gossip, like
Yes.
around the coffee machine? I don't know, but
It sounds like an awesome idea, though.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Ron Starr, thank you for sharing that right there.
Yeah.
That writing was a lifeline right there, because it really is.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
It is.
Wow, this ended on such a warming note right here.
It did. And this is why I love doing this. Well, I guess we can go ahead and.
Here, yeah, there's a little bit more suddenly coming in, right here. The point of the story is grief because the kid isn't the main character. Basically, he's livid, angry, a child, 10 or 11 maybe, just wanting death to people who wronged him, something like that. He consumes his afterlife and prevents him from finding peace. And that's another really cool way to take it as well. I think, like, because like once again, like you can do a whole lot with this basic premise and like whatever else you decide to throw at a kid trapped in a coffee pot.
Yeah.
That would be an existential horror for me, to be honest, especially after like working in an office and being the coffee boy.
Oh.
Oh man, I brewing other people's coffee is so stressful.
See that? Yeah.
Yeah. I worked as a barista for about a month. Never again. Actually, it was longer than that, but I didn't have to do the baristaing after a while, so that was good. But anyway, yeah. Thanks for joining us as always. We appreciate everybody who was able to join, and we had fun. What am I supposed to do here? I'm confused. As always,
I think you're supposed to hit that one square and then jump up. So fly up again, whoop, and then when you get to that one pillar that stopped you, you want to aim for the square down there.
Oh,
that's
I know.
By the ledge.
Yeah, I don't think I can actually jump on that. I think I know what to do though. Here we go.
Okay.
You ready?
Oh, yes.
Boom. Firepower. Anyway, our Discord is always a fun time if you ever want to talk about your stories, if you ever want to get feedback, if you want to join us for our Nanowrimo. And speaking of Nanowrimo, this was something I wanted to share. Don't ever compare yourself to other writers, because other writers are in different stages of their lives, and they're all going to have very different experiences and writing potential. Like, I learned that very quickly, not to compare myself to Lars, because he is a machine of a writer. And, you know, at the beginning of our friendship, I felt there were times where I was like, dang it, like, why can't I just be like Lars and write 3,000 words every single night? It's like, why do I struggle to get 500 words out on a page? And it's like, no, I shouldn't be comparing myself to Lars, because we're very different types of writers. We're very different people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
And you have a social life.
I do. I do have a social life.
Yeah.
Not to throw you under the bus or anything, Lars,
I sacrifice.
but
No, my social life ended in Flagstaff, so
yeah. We were your social life.
Yeah, you guys did and what a lifeline and a blessing you guys were, because that was rough.
Well, thanks, good buddy. Same to you.
And I know that we're wrapping things up right here, but so like I want this to actually kind of be a topic maybe for like 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So like one of the comments right here from Xenomits, like this is just something for us to like keep in the back, right here, and for those of you listening as like a woohoo, something to look forward to. Story information comes from music. I wish I could describe it in words. there is definitely something to be said for how music influences our stories. I
Yeah.
think that would be a fun topic to get into.
Yeah, I have so many stories influenced by music. As a matter of fact, a lot of my stories I will write while listening to a specific album because that album has the exact like emotions that I want to invoke in my story, and it helps me get into that mind space. But that's a conversation we should save for later. For now,
Yeah, we'll have this next time.
yeah, next time, baby. For now,
Next
we're
time.
gonna call it. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, I already kind of said it a little bit, but our Discord, let's keep the conversation going there. It's always going, and there's a bunch of other writers who can help give you uh, more influence. That's not the word I'm looking for. Inspiration, and they can help you out just as much. So, you guys are awesome, and we'll see you next time.
Tschüss.
Later.